Hello and welcome to a weekend news episode of the Leveraging AI podcast, the podcast that shares practical, ethical ways to improve efficiency, grow your business, and advance your career. This is Isar Meitis, your host, and I'm recording off-site today, so I hope the sound and the video quality and everything will be at least sufficient for our regular standards, but if not, I would appreciate your understanding. But there is a lot to talk about. We're going to deep dive this episode into three different topics. The first one would be the ongoing talent war in the AI space. The second is going to be, sadly, a topic I think we'll talk about every week, which is the impact on jobs and especially on the younger generation and college graduates. And we're going to end the deep dive with an interesting new ruling related to fair use of data for training AI models, which is very critical for the future. And then we have some interesting rapid fire items like the impact on small businesses versus the impact on enterprise. And we're going to end with some interesting breakthroughs and advancements, both in means of where AI is going, as well as vibe coding, which became one of my favorite hobbies. And so let's get started. We'll start with an update on the crazy talent wars that is going in the AI space right now. It all started a couple of weeks ago when Meta announced a $14.3 billion investment in Scale AI. When, if you heard the episode, I said what they basically did is they bought the CEO with all his knowledge and access to information on how companies are training their models for $14.3 billion, because I don't see a bright future for Scale AI themselves. That's obviously an insane investment, but it's showing you how much money these companies are willing to invest in order to stay ahead or stay competitive in this space. And so it continued last week when we announced that Meta is making very aggressive attempts to hire leading scientists in the AI space, including making insane offers to some leading people at OpenAI. OpenAI claimed that they were making offers of $100 million compensation in the first year, of up to $300 million in the first 3 years, and really amounts that make absolutely no sense, and yet it is maybe happening. So let's dive a little more to what happened since. So first of all, in the first week, OpenAI was able to capture 3 scientists from the OpenAI Zurich office that were deeply involved in different aspects of development, and then they added this week 4 additional people. And in total, they so far hired over 24 people, including 11 that come from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, which led to the formal announcement this week of the establishment of MSL, which stands for Meta Superintelligence Labs, that is going to be led by Alexander Wang, the former Scale AI CEO, and Nat Friedman, the former GitHub CEO. So these 2 people will lead this new department. Those were obviously the 2 biggest hires that they made, but as I mentioned, they managed to poach some researchers from the other leading labs. Now, this led to obviously some extreme reactions from the leadership at OpenAI. Mark Chen, the chief research officer at OpenAI, said, "I feel a visceral feeling right now as if someone has broken into our home and stolen something." And Sam Altman said that while Meta got some great people, they were able to keep their top talent. And he's basically saying that what Meta is doing will lead to a bad company culture that eventually will lead to its failure. Or the way he coined it, missionaries will beat mercenaries, which basically what he means is that because OpenAI is after the mission versus just after the money, they will be more successful in the long-term process. I guess only time will tell about that. But in parallel, Sam Altman said that they're recalibrating comp, which basically means that they are going to offer a lot more money for their top scientists to stay. I don't know if it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, but with their stock price or their presumed value or their current valuation, it's actually relatively easy to give people packages that will be worth that amount of money just by giving them more stock options or actual stock in the company. And the future looks even brighter than that for OpenAI. So they can make such investments in order to keep their top talent. Now, when you think about culture, you bring people together. Think about sports team that brought together multiple superstars from different backgrounds and try to make a great team out of them. In most cases, it's actually failed. It failed because there is no culture. It failed because there's no coherent culture to start with, because it's just a bunch of people from different places. And it fails because you put a lot of big egos in the same room and ask them to play nice together. And that doesn't always work. But again, we'll see how that evolves. It also creates a problem with existing employees in places like Meta, because Meta has many other AI scientists that have worked them in the last few years, and none of them makes this kind of money. Now, to be fair, Meta's CTO went back at Sam Altman saying he's dishonest and that they haven't made these kind of offers, or more specific, he said Sam is just being dishonest here. And then he clarified that the $100 million offers were not made to every single person, but reserved for a very, very small number of senior leadership roles. So it's not that he's saying they didn't do it. He's saying they didn't do it for any one of the people they actually were able to poach, but that they did make such offer for bigger names that probably were not successful. Otherwise, we would have heard about it. And as I mentioned, Sam said very clearly that the best people did not accept the offers from Meta and decided to stay at OpenAI, again, most likely with some very nice bonuses at OpenAI itself. But if you think that Meta is doing this to OpenAI is the only thing that's happening, it's obviously not. It's not new, this all acqui-hiring process of not actually acquiring a company, but just acquiring the people has been on fire in the AI space for a while now. And many leading scientists join the companies they are in today by acqui-hiring their companies. And that goes in order to go around regulation on non-competes and stuff like that, because then you're not really buying the company. The company presumably stays, like, again, I don't think Scale AI will survive this, but the company presumably stays, and you're just getting the top leading talent. Well, OpenAI just acquired the team behind Crossing Minds, which is a startup that's specializing in AI-driven recommendation systems for e-commerce. So similar thing, they did not hire Crossing Minds, the company, they just hired the Crossing Minds team. It's a company that has raised $13.5 million so far from leading investors, including people like Shopify and Index Ventures. And what they do is they use AI in order to generate a better recommendation and personalization engine for e-commerce, which falls straight in line with one of the directions OpenAI is hoping to grow in, which is becoming a platform where people are going to shop. So they are picking a battle basically with everyone, including Amazon in this particular case. The co-founder, Alexander Robiquet, now is going to be leading the research of post-training and AI agents at OpenAI, so a relatively senior position, and it's unclear what the rest of the team members will do. Crossing Minds as a company announced that it will no longer accept new clients, which also means it's probably assumes it's not going to keep on supporting the old clients, at least for the long run. In the short run, they probably will, because they probably have different agreements in place with these people. So where does this leave us as a whole? First of all, it is very, very clear that Meta is serious in competing for real in the AI space. So far what Meta was doing is they developed solutions for Meta that they then gave to everyone for free as open source models. That was at least what they announced. But it's very clear that Mark Zuckerberg, that was personally involved in interviewing and trying to poach some of the top leading AI talent in the world, that he wants to be one of the leading labs, period. Not a lab that develops solutions for Meta for internal use and then competing in the open space, but I think he wants to compete in the major league. And for that, he just established this new department with some very senior leadership. Now, where does that leave Jan LeCun, who has been leading all of Meta's AI efforts so far? How exactly is going to be the structure? Who's going to be reporting to who, if at all? All of that hasn't been really shared so far. But again, what's clear is that Meta wants to compete. They want to build leading models. They spent crazy amount of money on some of the top talent, or at least the top talent they could put their hands on in order to run this new division. And just like I said about Google many times, Meta has two very important aspects that not all these labs have. They have data because of all their social media channels, and they have the distribution because of all their social media channels. That being said, this distribution may not be the right distribution, especially if they want to get into the business and enterprise side of AI. And so it'll be very interesting to see how this evolves and exactly what they're planning to do with this new department. And I will obviously keep you updated, but it is very, very clear that crazy amounts of money are exchanging hands for the top AI talent right now. And I don't think that will stop in the near future. If anything, I think it's just going to get worse, which to me feels a little sad that this amount of money that could be helping so many other things is just going to specific individuals for the sake of competing in the AI race. But this is just my personal opinion. The second topic we're going to dive into is the impact on jobs. There was a very interesting interview with the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley, and he just spoke at the Aspen Ideas Festival at the end of June, and he warned that generative AI could, and I'm quoting, replace literally half of all white-collar jobs. Now, he's also claiming that replacing blue-collar jobs will actually be a lot more difficult than we tend to believe, even with the introduction of robots. He's saying that currently, AI is making people in white-collar jobs 28% more productive using AI, which means, in theory, you need 28% less people unless you are growing significantly fast, which is not the case in the car industry. He also shared the opposite. He shared that there's a decline in productivity among essential economy workers like factory staff, HVAC installers, electricians, despite really high demand with millions of unfilled roles in factory construction and auto technician jobs. And he believes that the US and the world need to go back to the basic and to trade schools and actually to push young individuals in that direction instead of looking down at people with those trades. And he made a very interesting claim that actually surprised me, that only 10% of Ford's operation can currently be robotized and potentially rising to 20% with humanoid robots. But he was emphasizing human ingenuity and creative fixes in real time that he believes that robots will be lacking, at least in the beginning. So I must admit, I agree with most of what he was saying. I agree 100% that there's a high risk to most white-collar jobs, or I will go with him, at least 50% of white-collar jobs. I also agree with him that pushing young individuals towards trades makes a lot of sense right now, because there's going to be a huge need for that from an infrastructure perspective, and there's a gap in the need right now. I do not agree with him as far as the capabilities of humanoid robots and how impactful they can be at a workplace like Ford. I do think that once these robots have AGI driving them or super intelligence driving them, they will be able to do all the things that humans do, just faster, better, cheaper, and come up with solutions that humans cannot come up with, especially if they have some kind of a data link in a centralized brain where they can share information in real time, which humans cannot. And so I do think that he underestimates the ability of robots in factories in this coming decade. Staying around the job market, Microsoft just announced that they're slashing 9,000 additional jobs starting immediately. That is about 4% of its 228,000 global workforce, and it's their largest job cut since 2023. Now, this is Microsoft's third layoff round in 2025, following 6,000 in May and 300 in June. And these job cuts span across teams, geographies, experience level, with specific impacts on the sales and Xbox divisions. But it's not just Microsoft. The tech industry has been a bloodbath since the beginning of the year. The US private sector lost 33,000 jobs in June alone, compared to expectations of generating 100,000 new jobs. So it's a $133,000 deficit in jobs compared to the projections that we had in the beginning of the year, compared to the projections that we had. And that obviously includes some of the biggest names in the world. Other than Microsoft, there's IBM, Intel, Google, Infosys, Autodesk, Keg, CrowdStrike. So many of the leading tech companies in the world have shed off many, many positions in the recent few months, and definitely since the beginning of the year. And what has been pouring more gasoline into this fire is some of the leading CEOs sharing their goals, or sharing their view, or sharing how much AI is doing right now. One of them that has been very loud and has shared this again this past week is Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, that revealed that 30% to 50% of internal work, including engineering and coding, is now handled by AI. That is mostly coding and engineering and customer service right now. Now, to be specific, he did not say that one ties to the other, meaning that the AI advancements is not necessarily leading to the job cuts. He framed it as, and I'm quoting, AI could do things that before we were doing, and we can move on to do higher value work. That has been the claim before this bloodbath of 63,000 jobs in tech that were lost since the beginning of this year. And Salesforce itself has cut over 1,000 jobs in 2025, and they've added a hiring freeze on software engineers as well. So the direction they're going is very clear, and they are developing the tools and the platform, their Agentforce platform, to allow other companies to do exactly the same thing. And we live in a capitalist world where the revenue and the financial results of companies is the top thing that the C-suite cares about. But it creates a very stressful time for any employees in most industries, but definitely in the tech industry, where on one hand, you have these CEOs making bold claims about what AI is doing and what it will be able to do in the near future. And on the other hand, you have employees who need to work for these people and are probably terrified for their own jobs. Now, the other risk is the longer-term risk. Gartner's latest research suggests that many AI-driven projects may fail within the next 2 years, up to 2027, due to unclear value, rising doubts, sustainability of these costs, and the total integration with other things that the companies are doing. And so if you're letting go of capable people right now, thinking that the AI will replace them, you might be making a bet that you will end up losing, and then you will have to rehire these people, which may not be around to hire. So right now, it's a very high risk game that these CEOs are playing with people's lives. And I think with the global economy as well, because I said that time and time again on this podcast, if we have a 20, 30% unemployment in high-paying white-collar jobs, that stops the economy, because these are people who spend the most amount of money in the economy in order to make it grow and move. But in the short term, the people that are getting hurt the most is young graduates. And there's a serious hiring crisis for people who just graduated from universities and colleges. Unemployment rate for college graduates just hit 5.8%, which is the highest it has been compared to the overall economy in the past 40 years. And that's per the New York Federal Reserve. And the way they measure this, and they're calling it the new grad gap, is they are taking the total unemployment minus the recent grad unemployment, basically showing what is the net unemployment for the rest of the people compared to just the undergraduates. That's the way they're measuring it. And I found an article that shows a graph that shows it. And the graph goes up and down and up and down, but it stays between 0.5% to 2.5% between the 1990s all the way to about 2013. And then it starts falling like a rock. And it kept on dropping, and it dropped below zero, meaning there's more unemployment for young grads than for the rest of the population around 2017, and it keeps dropping in an alarming pace right now. So I will say a few things. First of all, this is not a new thing. While everybody's making it sound that AI is taking away entry jobs, this is not the case based on this graph. All it's doing is it's adding gasoline to that fire. It's amplifying an already existing phenomenon of less and less jobs that are opening to entry jobs. Why is that? Well, it's a combination of different things. It started with there was a huge spike up in employment of young individuals just after the financial crisis, so between 2008 and 2013. And I think that might have been because people just needed work after the crisis, and they needed to do it cheap because they didn't have a lot of money, and that created a spike in getting entry-level jobs. That spike stopped. And since then, we're dealing with more and more crises, including the pandemic and then the post-pandemic, and now AI, that is driving the need for these jobs down. And I think the main thing is companies are focusing on making the safe short-term bets instead of the long-term investments, meaning they're willing to pay a little more for people who are already trained, who know what they're doing, even if these are not going to be there for the very long run, instead of investing in young individuals that may be the superstars of their company in the future. I just had the opportunity to interview a software engineer grad from UF, one of the top schools in Florida. She graduated cum laude and she cannot find a job. So top software engineer, one of the top in her school, one of the best schools in Florida. She cannot get a job because people are just not hiring for these positions right now. This is scary, and it's very, very real. Again, I just got to see it firsthand. She's really talented, really smart, really driven, and she can't find a job. And yes, on paper, this is a relatively small amount at 5.8% unemployment, but I don't know what the real numbers are if we had the ability to actually measure the people who do not share that information with the government, or that they have jobs that they didn't actually want just because they needed the money and they don't actually use what they've learned in college, etc., etc. I think it's a very big problem for the coming next generation. And as a father, that makes me seriously concerned. Going back to the question about learning trades versus learning white collar jobs, that might be the time to reconsider the paths of education in which we send our kids or push our kids to. And speaking of hiring, there is a really strange and again, worrisome situation right now in the whole field of HR and hiring people, because you have AI fighting AI. On one hand, you have tools who are flooding the market with better personalized resumes per job opening. Basically, you can sign up for a website, give it access to your background, tell it what jobs you're looking for. It will find jobs for you and will rewrite your resume in order to fit the requirements that are defined in the job posting. And on the flip side, more and more companies and recruiters are using AI tools in order to screen through resumes. So you basically have AI fighting AI, and the human aspect of it is being pushed to later in the process when you get to actual specific interviews, which means you may lose a lot of great potential because the AI has screened the initial candidates and may have overlooked great talent that don't fully align with what the AI is looking for. And to tell you how widespread the situation is, a Gallup survey shows that 93% of Fortune 500 chief HR officers are integrating AI into their HR process using tools like Workday's recruiting agent and other similar tools. And they're claiming it enables them to increase their recruiter capacity by 54%. On one hand, that's great. It means they can generate more jobs, at least presumably. But on the other hand, if what these tools are reading are AI-generated resumes that are now multiplied 100x probably from what it was a year ago, that means that a lot of the resumes that they're screening for wouldn't have been there previously. And so they're just running faster through more work in order to find the same people and not necessarily the right people. There are some good aspects of this, and the best one that I can think of is that AI tools reduce bias, right? We as people, when we interview people or when we read resumes, we are biased. That's what we are. Even if we're trying to avoid it, we are. And that means that we look for people who are like us and may not like people who are not like us. And having AI do that aspect is actually a good thing. And based on the recent research that I found, it increases hiring accuracy by 40%, meaning finding the right person for the right job is increased because there is no human bias us as part of the process. The problem is we have a very serious data quality when it comes to HR hiring, and you throw into the mix things like GDPR on what data you can and cannot collect and share, and you get into a situation where the AI HR agent is not optimized completely because it doesn't have all the right data, and hence it may not make the right decisions, which again leads to potentially in the long run the wrong hiring mix. One of the things that one of my clients did that I really, really like is they created an AI chatbot that helps them interview for company culture. So they flipped this concept on its head. Instead of making the AI the first filter, they're allowing the AI to help them be a better filter on their own, meaning what questions to ask in an interview and what kind of answers to look for that will be good or bad signs for the future in order to find the right fit for company culture. I think this is a much better direction than letting AI do a significant part of the hiring process for you. But I think it's very clear this is the future we're going to, especially in larger enterprises when they have to hire high volumes of people. And I want to touch on one last point that relates to AI adoption in businesses before we dive into the important legal precedents that I mentioned in the beginning, which is the gap between small, medium businesses to large enterprises when it comes to AI adoption. I must admit that when this thing all started, I thought that small businesses are going to run much faster than enterprises, as they always do. Will be able to use AI in order to run circles around enterprises. And what's actually happening is the other way around. Most small businesses are actually struggling and are far behind what's happening in the enterprises, at least based on what the enterprises are sharing in the news and in surveys with large organizations like Gallup and the big four consulting firms. But in a recent survey, it was found that only 24% of small business owners are using AI tools, even basic tools like ChatGPT, Canva, Copilot, while 76% do not. And this is according to the National Federation of Independent Businesses Small Business and Technology Survey. That's a mouthful, but it was a fair-sized survey that covered small businesses from all over the country. The good news is that because they're not using a lot of AI, 98% of small businesses that are using AI report no impact on employee headcount, indicating that AI is helping them in small productivity, but is not replacing workers right now. And I must admit, I see this firsthand. I speak at a lot of conferences, and most of these conferences are not for the enterprise level. Most of them are for small and medium businesses. And when I say small and medium, it's up to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue with hundreds of employees. This is still considered small to medium in the US. And I always ask the same question in the beginning when I give my talks to see where people are at in their journey. And the first two buckets is a total beginner, meaning I've played with ChatGPT a few times, but I don't know much more than that. And the second level is I'm using some basic AI tools like ChatGPT a lot, but I don't have any solid business use cases for it yet. And the last talk that I did was less than 2 weeks ago. So we're talking about halfway through the year of 2025, and the same exact result showed up again. About 70% of the people self-identify for one of the first two buckets, meaning either total beginners or we have played with AI or we use it regularly, but we don't have any solid business use cases for it yet. This is somewhat good news because most of the businesses in the US and most of the people who are working in the US are working for small and medium businesses, which are now moving slower and may give us a little bit more time to adjust and find the right way to implement it without making everybody unemployed. But it's also showing that there is a serious gap in education in small and medium businesses. While large enterprises can invest in infrastructure, but also invest in training and upskilling their employees, most small businesses do not do that right now, either because they don't have the resources, they don't have the vision, they don't understand what's coming. And the reality is that if you do not upskill your employees, you will lose market share. So in this particular case, you may not lose your internal employees in the beginning, but if your competition does that, then you will lose market share. And then you may lose all your employees because you won't be able to sustain your business. So AI education for small and medium businesses is becoming extremely critical because as soon as somebody else in your industry, large or small, will start adopting AI, their cost structure changes dramatically. And even if it's only 20% efficiency, and most of the numbers are talking about more than that, we just shared that Salesforce are talking about 30 to 50%. But if it's only 20%, that means your competition can sell their goods or services at 10% cheaper than you, still making 10% more money than they're doing today. And so if you are in a leadership position in a small or medium business and you understand what is happening and you are terrified and yet you have bigger fish to fry every day and fires to take care of and you don't have the bandwidth or capacity to deal with AI training, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or find the link in the show notes of this podcast on a way to book a meeting with me and to discuss how to provide the best possible training for your employees in order to start moving forward with the AI adoption or accelerate your existing adoption. And if you're an individual and your company is not providing that, come and join our AI business transformation course. We have helped thousands of business people, mostly business leaders and solopreneurs in learning how to apply AI most effectively across multiple aspects of the business. The next course starts on August 11th. It's 4 weeks, 2 hours a week, which means within 1 month, you'll be in a completely different situation where you are right now in your AI knowledge and skills, because it's a lot of hands-on experimentation across multiple aspects of business, from data analysis to content creation to sales automation and so on. So come and join us. Don't wait, because while last year this was nice to have, it's becoming essential for employees and for companies to have this. And if you are in a small or medium business, it gives you a huge opportunity to move ahead faster than your competitors, at least based on this recent survey. And the last topic on the jobs aspect is that Anthropic just launched the Economic Future Program, and they announced it on June 27th. And their goal is to help study of AI economic impacts and develop policy solutions to assist us in dealing with job displacements created by AI. If you remembered, we shared with you recently that Dario Amodei believed that AI could eliminate 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs in the next few years, with overall unemployment rising to 20% within 1 to 5 years. That's 1 to 5, meaning it could start next year. And their new initiative offers up to $50,000 in grants for empirical research of AI labor market effects, and Claude API credits for partnerships with research institutions to be able to help them do the research with AI, which kind of sounds counterintuitive. Let's use AI in order to find how AI is going to impact future jobs, kind of like fighting fire with fire. And this is another great example of how Anthropic are doing things a little differently and really trying to stay behind their core values of finding better, safe ways in order to introduce AI. I said many times before that all I see with those leaders is that they come in saying, hey, look, you got to be careful. We got to do this, we got to do that, but they're not actually offering any solutions. And so kudos to Dario Amodei and Anthropic for actually doing something proactive, at least on the research side, that hopefully help us move in the right direction. And I really hope that other organizations, including government agencies and other companies from the AI space, will move in a similar direction and put enough money and resources in order to help us all figure this out faster. I'm personally doing whatever I can in providing training, in providing free webinars, in doing this podcast, in doing training sessions, and a lot of other things that are doing in order to try to help people deal with the situation. But I think we need something much, much bigger from a country perspective and from a global perspective in order to figure this out properly. But since we mentioned Anthropic, this is the perfect segue for the last really important topic of this week. A federal judge ruled on June 24th that Anthropic use of copyrighted books to train its AI model Claude is fair use. It is the first time that a judge endorses this defense by the AI companies against all the lawsuits that were filed against them. So let's go back a few steps and do a little bit of background. All of these AI companies has trained on content they do not own. They basically scraped every piece of information they can from the internet and used it to train their models. When they got sued for doing that, they claimed fair use. They basically said this is just like humans are learning. The fact that the AI is reading the website or the blog or the book or whatever the situation is just like people doing it. It's just doing it more efficiently, and it's not actually reproducing the same content. It is using it as part of its knowledge in order to create new stuff. And the judge, William Alsop, and I hope I'm not butchering his name, called Anthropic's training process, and I'm quoting, exceedingly transformative, basically saying that the content that it's generating is not replacing or copying the original work, but it is dramatically different. And hence, it is aligning with fair use under the US copyright law. That being said, Anthropic is on trial for downloading over 7 million pirated books to build its central library of data. And the same judge ruled that this is not covered by fair use. So where does that leave us from AI world as a whole? First of all, I do believe, like I said many times before in this podcast, this will end up with the Supreme Court. Now, with the Supreme Court and the current government that we have, I do think it will lean towards this direction. I obviously don't know that for a fact, but that's what I think that will happen. But what he made very clear is that you cannot steal the information in order to train, meaning getting pirated books, not okay. Buying books in order to train your model is okay. And probably the same thing is true for many other types of content that these companies have put their hands on, whether lawfully or not. Now, in the beginning, Anthropic actually purchased millions of physical books that sadly they destroyed after that instead of donating in order to build their initial research library. And the judge claims that this is fair use, meaning if you have legal access to the material, then you can use it in order to train your models. So while this is definitely not the final aspect of this is a very important precedence moving in the right direction of two different things. A, it's saying what you can and cannot do. And B, it will probably push forward a lot more licensing deals that we've seen in the past year in order to allow these companies to train with data that they actually own and deliver us better and better results without breaking the law. What will happen with all the stuff that they already did that was not legal? It's very, very hard to say. I assume there's going to be some kind of a compensation package with billions of dollars changing hands, lots of lawyers making a lot of money, and the actual creators of the content making a little bit of money, maybe, but I don't see how this is going to stop the AI revolution. If you remember, we spoke in the past 2 weeks about the lawsuit by Disney and Universal against Midjourney, and we said that setting up a precedence against a small company will have a trickle effect to the rest of the industry. This is exactly the same thing the other way around, which is why this is so important. Again, it's the first time that somebody in the legal system has said that training models on existing material, as long as you had legal access to it, is fair use. This is the end of part 1 of this week's news episode. In this section, we just covered the deep dive components of the news for this week. The second part, which you can watch in the next episode, covers the rapid fire, lots of smaller pieces of news that you need to know this week. So if you have the time right now, just jump to the next episode and watch it. If not, you can watch it later. But either way, it's definitely worth watching.